One of the largest hurdles to overcome when working on vintage sport bikes are brittle plastic fairings. Let's take a look at my 93 CBR900RR here. A common area is back here by the tail light. You'll see how there's this complex curve that feeds into an interlocking tab. We've got a fastener here. Now this bike has low miles, so it's in pretty good shape, but my 94 CBR900RR, which has 40,000 miles on it, hasn't fared so well. That same tab is cracked on this particular bike. You can see right here, it's got a jagged edge right here. And that's bound to happen with the flexing of the fairing or as fasteners are over tightened. So we're gonna see what it takes to fix a tab like this. We'll first need some epoxy to act as new plastic that the tab will be made of. This is made by JB Weld. It's very strong stuff. It sets up quickly and it's good to work with. We'll be using some aluminum tape to act as a mold for this epoxy. We'll be using various grits of sandpaper to scuff up the surfaces of the fairing to allow it to bond well with the epoxy. And we'll also be using some wax and grease remover to clean up various surfaces so that the epoxy has a clean surface to bond to. So with all those materials laid out, let's see what it takes to get this done. I'm going to rough up the surface of the fairing with some sandpaper so that the epoxy has a nice key to grab hold of. With a nice keyed surface on the fairing, it's time to clean it up with some wax and grease remover. Alright, with the fairing panel all prepped, it's time to make a mold with our aluminum tape. With the aluminum tape applied, we'll see that we have a nice basic mold going on here. Now it's important to remember we're not trying to make a perfect mold right from the get-go. We're just wanting to create a catch basin for the epoxy to flow into. Later on, we'll shape it with a Dremel tool and some sandpaper to get that exact contour we're looking for. So with that, let's apply some epoxy. And now with our epoxy mixed up, it's time to fill in the mold. All right, with the epoxy put into the mold, now it's just time to wait for it to set up. It should take about an hour. All right, so it's been over an hour and the epoxy has set up. It's now hard. So all we gotta do is remove our mold and see how it looks. All right, with the mold removed, we can take a look and see our finished product here. But you know what? After looking at it, I can tell it's not built up enough. There's not quite enough material there to sand away and get the result we're looking for. So I'm gonna have to put another mold on there and pour some more epoxy on there and fill in this jagged edge we've got right here. It's a little bit of guess and check in this sort of operation, but you just gotta keep at it, spend some time on it, and eventually you'll end up where you wanna be. Okay, now our second application of the epoxy has fully dried. I had to let it sit for about 15 or 16 hours because the epoxy is so thick. But now it's finally hardened. Let's remove the mold and see how she looks. With our mold peeled away, we'll see that we're left with a large hunk of plastic that's now one with our fairing. It looks ugly right now, but we'll sand this away with our Dremel tool, and eventually we'll be left with the tab we've been missing. Okay, so I've got the tab and the contour of the tail section formed in here roughly. Pretty much all of the excess epoxy has been ground away and we have a general shape taking place. Now we're going to fill in these divots that we have here and these sanding down marks with some Bondo filler, some plastic type Bondo filler so it allows some flexing. And we'll get this really smooth, fill in all these little gaps that we have around here, around the taillight section. And then after that, we'll sand that really smooth, and then we'll apply some paint. Now that I've fixed the fairing tab on one side of the bike, we've got to fix the other side now. Alright, now our paint is all dried up, the clear coat is nice and glossy, and if you didn't know any better, you'd never know that these tabs were ever broken. Now before we can put these side panels back onto the bike, we'll have to remove some things that the previous owner put in place, like this nasty wood screw and these hardware store style spring nuts. The previous owner put these in there because the tabs were broken, so they had to install larger fasteners in order to keep the fairings fitted to the tail section. However, now that I've fixed up the tail section, we can go ahead and install the factory Honda fasteners like these bolts and these factory spring nuts. With these fasteners in place, not only will the tail section look more clean, it will be factory correct. So let's get going. So there we have it. Both fairing tabs have been repaired, painted up, and it looks almost like new. Let's take a look here. See the curvature, and even the paint matches up just like it would have done from the factory. Now I have about $40 into this repair, maybe about 2 days. But you know what? It's not that bad. It's not like I could go out and buy new fairings. You just can't get them anymore. Now this is definitely a job that an average DIYer can take on themselves. So if you have broken fairing tabs, what do you have to lose? Try it out.